Hollow Creek runs east into the hills. It turns to gravel after a mile. After 2 miles, it turns to dirt. After 3, it turns into something a county map will not promise you. That was the road Maren Whitfield took. She did not choose it. She only walked. And when one road ended, she took the next. The landlord's name was Doyle Pruitt. He was not a cruel man. That was the worst part. He stood on her porch in a yellow rain slicker and would not look at her. The water came off his hood in a steady line and pooled at his boots. He had a paper in his hand. He kept folding it and unfolding it. 3 months, Maren. I know. I gave you 4. I know. My wife says I gave you 5. Doyle, please. He looked at the paper. He looked at his boots. He looked at the porch ceiling like it might offer him a sentence he didn't have. Midnight, he said. I'm sorry, I can't anymore. He turned, then he turned back. He took a 20 out of his wallet, held it out, like a child offering a stone to a creek. Maren did not take it. He set it on the rail. He left. Inside the house, Iris was crying. Iris was 11 months old. She had been crying for an hour because she was hungry, and because Maren had been crying, and because babies know. Maren picked her up. Wren was sitting on the kitchen floor with her doll. Wren was 6. The doll was missing one arm. The doll had been missing one arm for 2 years. Wren did not seem to mind. She held the doll close and watched her mother the way a child watches a sky looking for something to read. Beau 3 was asleep on the couch under his father's old jacket. The jacket smelled like reed. 8 months it had smelled like reed. Maren had not washed it. She would not wash it. Some things you do not wash. Silas 8 was at the table. Silas had laid out the contents of his backpack. The flashlight. The pocket knife his father had given him for his 7th birthday. 3 peanut butter crackers. A pair of socks rolled into a ball, a rock he'd liked. He looked up at his mother. Mama. Yeah, bud. Are we leaving? She did not answer. Because what do you say? Because the answer was yes. Yes, baby, we are leaving. We are leaving the only walls you have ever slept inside. We are leaving the porch where your father used to stand and watch you ride your bike up and down the driveway. We are leaving in a rainstorm because Doyle Pruitt is a kind man with a wife who says they have given enough. So she did not answer. She walked over. She put her hand on the back of his head. She let him press his face into her side. Iris was still on her hip, still crying. Wren was watching from the floor, and Maren, 33 years old, 8 months a widow, 3 months behind on rent, counted the money in her coat pocket without taking it out. $47, 2 20s, a 5, 2 1s. that was what was left. She thought about her sister in Albany. Her sister was not speaking to her. 3 years now. A fight over their mother's ring. Stupid. Stupid the way all family fights are stupid in retrospect. She had picked up the phone 6 times in 8 months. She had not dialed. She was not going to dial tonight. Not in a rainstorm. Not with 4 wet children. Not with $47 and her pride still hanging on her bones like a wet coat. She thought about the church, the Methodist church on Bell Road. Pastor Cordelia. They said the Methodist church on Bell Road took people in, but she had never been inside. And it was a Tuesday, and she did not know if a Tuesday counted. She thought about the women's shelter in Burlington, 45 miles. She thought about her car. Her car was in Doyle Pruitt's driveway. Doyle Pruitt's driveway was where the car was sleeping for the rest of forever because the transmission had quit in April, and you cannot fix a transmission with prayer. So she walked. She put Iris in the front of her coat. She zipped what would zip. She put the diaper bag over one shoulder and her own bag over the other. She woke Beau. She told him in the voice you use to wake a small child, the voice that makes the world sound like nothing is wrong, that they were going on a walk. A late walk, a special walk. With Mama. Beau did not cry. Beau was tired. Beau let his big brother put him on his back. Wren took her doll. Silas took his flashlight. Marin took the last thing in the kitchen, which was a half loaf of bread on the counter, and she put it in her bag, and she closed the door behind her family for the last time. The rain was sideways. The first mile was on the road. The flashlight was a keychain. It was the size of a thumb. The bulb was already going. Silas held it out in front of him like a sword that did not believe in itself. Wren held Marin's free hand. Iris was inside her coat. Beau was on Silas's back asleep, his small arms loose around his older brother's neck. Marin did not have a coat for Iris. She had wrapped her in the only blanket they'd kept dry, which was now wet. She had pulled her own coat around them both. The water came off her hair in cold lines down her neck. Her shoes had stopped being shoes after the first half mile. They were soup. Mama! What, baby? Mama, where are we going? Wren's voice was the quietest thing in the world, smaller than the rain, smaller than her own breathing. Somewhere, Marin said. It was the only word she could afford. The road went from blacktop to gravel. The gravel went from gravel to dirt. The dirt went from dirt to mud, and the mud went from mud to a thing that pulled. Twice Marin stopped because Wren could not lift her feet anymore. Twice Marin bent down and put her cheek against her daughter's cheek and whispered things that were not promises because she had no promises left. Only the sound of her own voice, which was the closest thing a mother carries to a roof. Silas did not stop. Silas walked ahead, Beau on his back, flashlight in his hand. 8 years old and walking like a man because there was no man left to walk for them, and he had figured this out somewhere between the front door and the mailbox without being told. Marin watched him. She thought, he is too young. She thought, he is the right age. Both thoughts were true. Both thoughts were unbearable. So she put them down, the way you put down a hot pan. The 3rd mile was a long mile. Iris had stopped crying. That was worse than the crying. Marin kept reaching inside her coat to feel the baby's chest. Up, down, up, down. Still warm. Still here. Still here. Still here. Still here. A truck went past. A red truck going the other way, going fast. The headlights washed over them and were gone. The truck did not slow. The truck did not stop. The truck did not see 4 wet children and a woman holding a baby on a back road in Vermont at midnight. Or it saw them, and it did not stop. Marin did not know which was worse. She did not have the energy to decide. Past the 3rd mile, the road forked. The left fork went up. The right fork went into the trees. Silas stopped. He turned. He looked at her. Mama? Yeah. Which way? Her mouth was so cold she could not feel her bottom lip. She tried to think. She could not think. Thinking required a brain that was not also currently being used to keep 4 children alive, and there was only one of her, and she was running on instinct now, and instinct said into the trees. Into the trees. Trees mean cover. Trees mean windbreak. Trees mean if you have to stop the rain, stop a little. Right, she said. Silas turned right. She followed. The trees took the road and made it narrower. The trees took the rain and made it a drum. The trees took the dark and made it a different kind of dark, a closer dark, a dark that pressed. A 1/4 mile into the trees, Silas stopped again. He turned. He held up the flashlight. The bulb gave 1 weak pulse and 1/3 of what it had been. He looked at his mother. Mama! She came up next to him. She followed his eyes. There was a shape in the trees, off the road, 20 feet, maybe 30. A shape that was not a tree, square, low, the kind of shape that had been built by hands. What is that? Wren said. I don't know, Marin said. But she did know. She knew because hands build houses, and the woods were full of old hands and old houses and abandoned things in Vermont, and she knew, the way you know a thing without confirming it, that this was a roof. A roof was the only word in her head. A roof. A roof. A roof. She left the road. She stepped into the wet grass. The grass was up to her knees. The water on the grass went straight through what was left of her jeans. Iris stirred against her chest. The children followed. the shape became clearer. It was a cabin, small, low-roofed. Wood, old wood, old enough that the boards had silvered, old enough that one of the porch posts had buckled. There was a porch. There was a door. There were also roses. Wild roses had grown up over the front of the cabin in what had to be 20 years, 30 years of nobody coming. Thorny canes, the thickness of her thumb, climbing up over the railings, crossing the porch boards, lacing in front of the door like a person had laced them on purpose, like a person had said, "Stay out." A few late blooms hung among the thorns, dark red, almost black in the rain. Marin stood at the bottom of the steps. The thorns were the size of a man's thumb. "Mama," Wren whispered. "Stay back, baby." She set Iris down on Silas's back on top of Bo, the two children layered like one small bundle. She told Silas to hold them. Silas held them. She took the kitchen knife out of her bag. The kitchen knife was the only thing she had brought from the kitchen besides the bread. She started cutting. The thorns fought her. The first cane she pulled drew a line of red across her wrist. The second one, the back of her hand. The third one caught her in the thumb and would not let go, and she had to set the knife down and pry the cane off with her other hand, and she swore low and ugly so the children would not hear, except they were 8 and 6 and 3, and they had ears. Silas heard. Silas did not say anything. She stepped back. She looked at the door. She looked at her 4 children on the porch behind her, soaked, silent, watching. "I'm sorry," she said. She said it to the door. She said it to the woman who must have lived behind the door once. She said it to whoever owned this place now. She said it to God, possibly. She did not know. She kicked the door. The wood was old. The wood gave. The lock came out of the frame with a sound like a small bone. The door swung open into a black room. A smell came out. Mildew, wood, time. The smell of a house that has been holding its breath for a very long time. Marin did not hesitate. "Inside," she said. The children went inside. She pulled the door closed behind her as best she could. The latch was gone. She wedged the kitchen knife into the frame to hold it shut against the wind. Then she stood in the dark. She turned on her phone. 2% battery. The flashlight on the phone gave her a circle of weak white light. She moved the circle around the room. A couch under a sheet. A table under a sheet. Chairs under a sheet. A wood stove against the wall. 3 doorways to other rooms. Cobwebs in every corner like soft gray lace. Dust on every surface, a finger thick. But a roof. A roof, a roof, a roof. She pulled the sheets off the couch and the chairs. She shook them out. They were filthy, but they were dry. She made a nest on the floor. She put the children in the nest. She took off the wet things. She put on the dry things. She had 2 dry sets of clothes for 4 children, and she layered what she had. She mixed Iris a bottle, the last of the formula, mixed with rainwater from a place where the roof had failed, and a bowl on the floor had caught 2 cups before Marin had walked in. Not clean, not safe, but warm in her own hands, warmed against her own skin, and there was no other thing to do. Iris drank. Iris stopped fussing. Iris fell asleep against Marin's collarbone like a small sigh that the world had been holding back. Bo curled around Silas. Wren curled around her doll. Silas, who had been carrying his brother for 2.5 miles, and who had not eaten since lunch, and who was 8 years old, did not lie down. He sat up against the wall and watched the door. Silas. Yeah, Mama. Lie down. I want to keep watch. She closed her eyes. She did not have it in her to argue with an 8-year-old who wanted to keep watch. She let him keep watch. She sat against the wall with the baby on her chest, and she watched her son watch the door, and she thought about her husband Reed, who had died on a Wednesday in February on a stretch of Route 7 outside of Rutland because a deer ran out, and he did not have a helmet, and he was 35 years old and laughing at a song on the radio when the world ended. She thought about the funeral. She thought about the bills. She thought about the way grief does not make the mailman stop coming. And she thought in the kind of voice you only use inside your own head at 1 a.m. when everything has gone. Reed. Reed, what do I do? Reed, what do I do now? The dark did not answer. Iris breathed against her chest. Marin slept. She slept the way an animal sleeps with one ear up. She slept for 2 hours, then woke. Slept for another, then woke. Each time she woke, she counted children. 4. 4. 4. 4 was the number that meant she could close her eyes again. The first light came in the windows like a rumor, pale, watery, the way September light comes in Vermont when the night has been long. Marin sat up. Her back was a single bruise. Her hands had stopped bleeding, but had not started forgiving her. She moved Iris carefully onto a sheet on the floor and stood up. The cabin in the daylight was a different thing. The dust was worse. The cobwebs were worse. The smell of mildew was the same. But she could see now. She could see the shape of the room. A small kitchen at one end, a wood stove, a counter, empty cabinets, everything older than her. A sitting room at the other end, the couch, the chairs, a bookshelf that had 4 books on it, and a coffee mug that someone had set down a long time ago. 3 doors, a bedroom, a bathroom the size of a closet, a pantry with nothing in it. She tried the kitchen tap. It coughed. It gagged. It ran brown for a count of 8. Then it ran clear. She stood there with her hand under the water, and she cried just once. Just the kind of cry that lets a thing past your throat and then stops, because crying was a luxury she could not afford to have a relationship with. There was water. She washed her hands. She washed her face. She drank from her hands. The water tasted like a well, like minerals and stone, like the bottom of something old. It was the first water she had drunk in 12 hours that she had not paid for. She thanked it. She thanked the woman who must have lived here. She did not know yet what kind of thanking was about to happen. She did not know what was inside the walls of the house she had broken into. She did not know what was under the floor or behind the chimney or written on the inside of a window in a hand that had been still for 3 years. She only knew that her children were sleeping behind her, and they were dry, and there was a roof, and there was water. That was enough for 1 minute. She would worry about the next minute when it came. Silas woke up first. He came over and stood beside her at the sink. He looked at the brown ring around the inside of the basin. He looked at his mother's red hands. He took her hand without asking and turned it over and looked at the cuts. Mama, it's okay. They're deep. They're not. They are. She kissed the top of his head. Eat the bread, she said. He went to the bag. He took out the bread. He cut it into 4 small pieces with his pocket knife. He set the biggest piece aside for her. He gave the rest to his sisters and his brother as they woke. Wren ate without speaking. Bo ate 2 bites and tried to give the rest to his big sister. Silas folded Bo's small hand around the bread and would not let him give it up. Marin did not eat the piece Silas had set aside. She would. Later, when the children weren't watching. Mothers know. She walked the room slowly with the baby in her arms. She looked at the couch, the table, the windows. The windows. There were 3. 2 small ones in the kitchen, both fogged and grimy, and 1 larger one, the front window, the one that looked out at the porch and the broken thorns and the road and the trees. The big window. Silas came up beside her again. Mama, he said, we could clean that one so we could see out. It would be lighter in here too. She looked at him. She thought, you are 8 years old. She thought you are the right age. She thought, how did I get a son like this? She did not say any of that. She only said, yeah, bud, let's do that. She took one of the cleanest sheets and she tore a strip off the corner. She wet it in the kitchen sink. She walked over to the big front window and she started to clean. She started at the top. The dust came off in sheets, not flakes. Sheets. Years of it. The kind of dust that has its own weather. She wiped down. The strip turned gray, then black. She rinsed it. She wiped again. She moved the strip in a slow circle, top to bottom, side to side, leaning her weight into the glass because the dust was that old. Wren came over to help. She got a stool. She climbed up. She started on the bottom corner with her own piece of cloth. They worked in a small, companionable silence. Mother and daughter, one window between them, the September light coming in stronger as the dust came off. Silas swept the floor with the broom he had found behind the door. Bo played with a wooden spoon under the kitchen table. Iris slept on the couch in a nest of dry sheets. It was, Marin thought, the most ordinary thing in the world. A woman cleaning a window in the morning, a small girl helping, a boy sweeping. Except the woman had broken into the house at midnight, and the small girl had not eaten dinner, and the boy was carrying his brother through the trees 4 hours ago, and nothing here was ordinary. Nothing here belonged to her. Nothing here was promised past the next hour. She wiped a circle in the upper right corner of the glass. Her hand stopped. She wiped again, more slowly. She wiped a third time. There was something on the glass. Letter. Not on the outside, on the inside, written into the dust on the inside of the window. By a finger, a long time ago. The dust had set around them like a frame. The letters were preserved in a layer of grime that the years had not disturbed. She wiped around them, careful now, careful as a woman handling a thing she does not understand. The letters became words. Her hand went still, stopped breathing. Mama. Wren was looking up at her from the stool. Marin did not answer. She read. She read again. She read a third time, because the first 2 times her brain had refused to assemble the meaning the way a brain refuses meaning when meaning would change everything. If you are here, God brought you. Don't give up. Beneath the floor near the stove, there is something for you to begin again. Edith. Mama. She still did not answer. Mama, you're crying. She had not known she was crying. She put her hand on the glass over the words. The glass was cool. Her hand was warm. She could feel her own heart beat through her palm against the place where another woman's finger had once moved through dust. 3 years ago, or longer, a woman who did not know her, a woman who could not have known her, a woman who had written this anyway. Silas. Her voice came out wrong. Silas, come here. He came. He saw her face. He saw the window. He set the broom down very carefully, like a person who knew even at 8 that some moments require both hands. Read it, she said. What? Read it. I need to know I'm not. I need to know it's there. He stepped up on the stool with Wren. He squinted. He read out loud, slow the way an 8-year-old reads. If you are here, God brought you. Don't give up. He stopped. He looked at his mother. Keep going. Beneath the floor, near the stove, there is something for you to begin again. Edith. He turned his head. Mama. Yes, baby. What's beneath the floor? She did not answer. She walked very slowly across the room to the wood stove. The stove sat on a small platform of brick, and the brick was set into the floorboards, and the floorboards around the brick were old, wide pine. She knelt. She knocked on the boards with her knuckles. Solid, 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 hollow. One board, the third one out from the brick, not pinned the same as the others. The grain ran wrong. The nail heads sat slightly higher. She reached for the kitchen knife. It was not in the door anymore. Silas had moved it. Silas brought it to her without being asked. Stand back, she said. The children stood back. She wedged the blade into the seam. The wood gave a small protest. She wiggled. She pried. A nail came up, then another. Then the board lifted. Underneath the board, in a rectangular space the size of a shoebox lined with what had once been a piece of wax paper and was now a brown, brittle thing that shattered when she touched it, was a metal box. A tin by the kind you used to buy cookies in at Christmas. The lid was sealed with rust, but the paint was still there. A faded pattern of holly and berries. Someone's hands had washed and dried this box a dozen times before they had buried it. Marin lifted it out. It was heavier than it looked. She set it on the floor. She did not open it right away. She sat back on her heels. Her 4 children gathered around her. Iris awake now on her hip again. Bo on her left, his small hand on her knee. Wren on her right, her doll under her arm. Silas in front of her eyes on the box the way he had looked at his father's casket 8 months ago. Steady, already too old. Mama, Wren whispered. Open it. Marin did not have a voice. She wedged the knife under the lid. She pried. The rust gave a small dry crack. The lid lifted. Inside the box were 4 things. The first was a stack of bills. 20s and 10s and 5s folded together with a rubber band so old it broke when she tried to pull it. She did not count the money yet. She only saw it. The paper was the color of paper that had been in the dark a long time. The second was a notebook. Blue cloth cover. Faded. The corners dog-eared. The spine cracked. A handwritten label on the front. Recipes, Edith Hollister. The third was a folded piece of fabric. A wool scarf cream and pale gray hand knit. She lifted it out and a smell rose. Lavender. A sachet had been tied inside the scarf years ago, and the lavender had gone almost to dust, but the smell was still there. The smell another woman had carried on her shoulders, walking to church on cold mornings, the smell of a life. The fourth was an envelope, yellow with age, stamped along one edge with a notary's seal, sealed shut. On the front, in the same hand that had written the message on the window, 4 words. For whoever finds this. Marin held the envelope in her lap. She did not open it yet. She counted the money first because she had to know. She counted slowly, bill by bill, out loud. The children watched. 3,000, 3,400, 3,600, 3,750, 3,800. She set the money down. She put her face in her hands. She did not cry the way she had cried the night before. She cried the way a person cries when something inside them, something that has been holding its breath, finally lets go. Ren climbed into her lap. Bo put his head on her shoulder. Silas, who did not know what else to do, simply put his hand on her arm and left it there. After a minute, she sat up. She wiped her face. She opened the envelope. There were 3 things inside. A long letter in the same trembling hand. A folded document with a notary stamp dated 3 years before transferring the title of the property to whoever might come to it. And a small cloth pouch of seeds with a yellow tag tied to the drawstring. Sunflowers and daisies. I planted thorns out of pain. You plant flowers out of love. Marin held the letter for a long time before she read it. She read it once silently. Then she read it out loud because Silas asked and because the children deserved to hear it the way the woman had meant it to be heard. The letter was 3 pages long. It was signed Edith Hollister. The woman had been 78 when she wrote it. She had lived in the cabin for 40 years. She had raised 5 children alone after her husband had left her. She had baked bread and cakes from the recipes in the blue notebook and had sold them at the Saturday market in Hollow Creek for 30 years. She had survived because women had taught her how to survive. Because she had survived, she was leaving the cabin to whoever came next. And the money, and the notebook, and the seeds. If you are reading this, the letter said, you are not alone. You never were. Other women came before you. Other women will come after you. We are a chain. Hold on. Then a postscript. The roses with thorns I planted to hide the house. I did not want it found by the wrong people. When you are ready, cut them down. Plant the seeds. Let it be a place that welcomes now. Marin folded the letter. She did not say anything for a long time. Outside, the September light was full now. The rain had stopped. Somewhere in the trees, a bird was calling. She stood up. She crossed the room. She stood at the cleaned window. She looked through the words written in dust 3 years ago to the porch beyond where the cut canes of the wild roses lay in a wet pile, and beyond the porch to the edge of the trees where the road came in. She put her hand against the glass. "Thank you," she said. She said it out loud, to the empty room, to the woman she had never met. "Thank you. I won't waste it. I promise." She turned around. Her 4 children were watching her. "Get your shoes," she said. The children did not move. "Get your shoes," she said again. "We are going to town." The town of Hollow Creek had a population of 912, a single traffic light, a feed store, a Methodist church, a Baptist church, a pharmacy, a general store, with a hand-painted sign that said, "Briggs General since 1962, and a Saturday market that ran from May to October on the lawn of the town hall. Maren had been to Hollow Creek twice in her life. Once when she was 12 and her grandfather had taken her fishing. Once last spring when she had driven out with Reed to look at a piece of land they had thought for one summer they might be able to buy. She remembered the second time more clearly than the first. She did not let herself remember it now. She walked into Briggs General Store at 10:30 in the morning with 4 children and $300 in her coat pocket, and her hands wrapped in strips of an old sheet. The man behind the counter was 60, maybe 65. White hair, thick glasses pushed up on his forehead, a pencil behind one ear. A face that had been built by weather and patience in equal parts. He looked up when the bell over the door rang. He looked at her hands. He looked at her children. He did not look at her like she was a stranger. He looked at her like he was already deciding something. "Help you, ma'am." "I need groceries." "Take your time." She took a basket. She walked the short aisles slowly. Rice, beans, a small bag of flour, eggs, milk, a jar of peanut butter, a loaf of bread that had been baked that morning by his wife, a pack of crackers because Bo had stopped at the cracker shelf and put his small hand against it, 2 oranges because Wren liked oranges, a small box of formula because Iris was running out and Maren had sworn to herself in the rain that her baby would not run out. She brought the basket to the counter. The man rang it up. "143, he said, "and 19. She gave him 2 of her hundreds. He counted out her change. He set it on the counter. He did not move his hand off it. "You new in town?" "Yes." "Where?" She hesitated. "The cabin, out on the old Mantegua Road, the one with the roses on it." His hand came off the change. He took off his glasses. He set them on the counter. He looked at her in a way she could not read. "Edith Hollister's place." "Yes." "You knew Edith." "No." "Then how did you?" "She left it to me. I mean, Not to me, to whoever found it." He stood there. He picked up his glasses. He put them back on. He looked at her hands again. He looked at Silas, who was holding Beau's hand. He looked at Wren, who was holding Marin's. He went into the back of the store without a word. Marin stood at the counter holding her change. She did not know what she had done. She did not know if she had said the wrong thing. She did not know if he was about to come back with a phone in his hand, calling somebody about a stranger who claimed to be living in a dead woman's house. He came back with a paper bag. Inside the paper bag, he put a wedge of cheddar cheese, a package of frozen pierogies, a pound of bacon, a summer sausage, a small jar of his wife's honey. He pushed the paper bag across the counter. He pushed her change back at her too. "Mr. Briggs? Ezra? Ezra, I can't. Edith Hollister delivered my granddaughter on the kitchen floor of my house in November of 1992 because the snow was 3 feet deep and the ambulance was 40 minutes out and my wife was already pushing. She did not charge us. She did not let us pay her later. She brought my wife a casserole for 2 weeks afterward." He stopped. He cleared his throat. "If she left the house to you, then she left the house to you. Welcome to Hollow Creek." His eyes were wet. He did not pretend they were not. Marin could not speak. She nodded. She took the bag. The bell rang behind her as she went out. She stood on the sidewalk. She had to put the bag down on a bench because her hands were shaking too hard to carry it any farther. Silas put his arm around her waist. "Mama, are you okay?" "Yes, baby, I'm okay." "You don't look okay." "I am, though." "Is it a happy crying?" "Yes." "Okay." He kept his arm around her. She got herself together. She picked up the bag. They walked across the green to where a small farmer's market was setting up for the Tuesday morning. A woman in her 50s, salt and pepper braid leather apron, was setting out jars of jam on a folding table. The woman looked up. The woman looked at the children. The woman set down the jar she was holding. "Honey." "Yes." "You all right?" I'm starting a baking thing. I wondered if I could rent a stall." The woman looked at the bandages on Marin's hands. The woman looked at Iris on her hip. The woman did not ask any of the questions she could have asked. "I'm Imogene Patterson," she said. "I run the market, Saturdays 8 to 2. Stalls are $40, but you can have one for free if you bring me a cherry pie and tell me where you got the recipe." "How did you—" "Honey, look at your hands. You've been cutting roses. There is exactly one cabin in this county with thorns on the door. And the woman who lived there made the best cherry pie this market has ever sold. I will see you Saturday." She turned back to her jam. Marin stood with the paper bag of food in her arms and 4 children at her feet, and she did not move because she did not know what to do with the kindness people were trying to put on her in handfuls. She started to thank the woman. She did not finish. Because a black SUV had pulled up to the curb behind her, and the door was opening, and a man in a gray suit was getting out. He was tall, mid-50s, silver at the temples, the kind of suit that costs more than Marin's car had ever been worth. He walked across the green like a man who had walked across this green many times before. He stopped in front of her. He smiled. It was not a real smile. It was an expensive smile. Mrs. Whitfield. She had not given anyone her name. Yes. Bennett Caldwell, Caldwell Holdings. I understand you've moved into the old Hollister place. That's right. I'm afraid that property doesn't belong to you, Mrs. Whitfield. It does. I have. My grandfather, Augustus Caldwell, purchased that parcel in 1979. There has been some confusion over the deed. I'm sure we can clear it up. She did not speak. She was holding the paper bag of food and an 11-month-old baby, and she was looking at a man whose suit cost more than her dead husband's last paycheck. I will offer you $15,000, he said, for your inconvenience, to leave by the end of the week. That is more than fair, and it is more than you are likely to get from a court. Imogene Patterson behind him did not move, but her hand went still on the jar of jam in a way that meant she was listening. Ezra Briggs across the green came out of his store. He did not approach. He just stood on his step, watching. Marin found her voice. No. The smile did not move. You should think about it, Mrs. Whitfield. You have 4 children. I am thinking about it. The answer is no. Mrs. Whitfield. I said no, Mr. Caldwell. He held her eyes for one more second. Then he nodded once the way a man nods who has been told no and has not yet decided what he will do about it. He walked back to the SUV. The SUV pulled away. Imogene Patterson said very quietly without looking up from her jam, Honey, I would not have taken that money either, but I would have a lawyer by Friday. Marin did not have a lawyer. She did not have anything close to a lawyer. She stood with her 4 children on the green of a town she had never lived in, and she felt the shape of something she did not have a name for yet, but which she knew, the way a woman knows weather coming, was about to be the fight of her life. That night, after the children were asleep, she lit a candle on the kitchen counter and opened the blue notebook. She read the recipes: cherry pie, apple cake, sour cream biscuits, buttermilk donuts, cornbread her grandmother would have wept over. She turned the pages slowly. She read the notes in the margins. Beat hard. Don't open the oven. The trick is the cold butter. On the very last page, the notebook ended in a recipe for honey sponge cake. Below the recipe, the page was almost blank. Almost. 3 lines in pencil. So faint she had to hold the candle close to see them. She read them. She read them again. Her hand began to shake. If a Caldwell ever comes, look behind the chimney and find my Marian. She closed the notebook. She sat at the kitchen table in the candlelight and she stared at the wood stove and the brick of the chimney behind it. Outside, the wind came up in the pines. Inside in the cabin, Edith Hollister had left her. Maren Whitfield understood for the first time that she had not stumbled into a place. She had been chosen for one. And whatever was behind that chimney had been waiting for her too. Maren did not sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table until the candle burned down to a stub. Then she lit another. Then she sat until the second one burned down too. The notebook stayed closed in front of her. Her hand stayed on top of it. If a Caldwell ever comes, look behind the chimney and find my Marian. Marian. Who is Marian? Edith had said 5 children in the letter. She had not named them. She had said they had their own lives now, their own families. She had said she had moved into town to live with the eldest. She had not said which one. She had not said where. Marian could be anywhere. Marian could be dead. Marian could be 3 states away in a kitchen. Maren would never see drinking tea, not knowing that a woman she had never met was sitting in her mother's cabin at 2 a.m. with a knife and a candle and a letter and the name of a man named Caldwell pressing down on the back of her neck like a hand. The chimney first. She would do the chimney first. She stood up. She picked up the candle. She walked across the room. The wood stove was iron, heavy, cold. The brick chimney rose behind it, mortared into the wall. She set the candle on the floor. She got down on her knees. She ran her fingers along the brick. Course by course. She was looking for what? She did not know. A loose brick, a crack, a seam. 20 minutes she ran her fingers over rough red brick and felt nothing but old mortar. Then, behind the stovepipe, where the iron met the wall, a brick that sat half an inch deeper than the others. Not loose, just set wrong. She wedged the kitchen knife in. The brick did not move. She wedged harder. It did not move. She put the candle on the brick to see better. She traced the mortar around it. The mortar was not the same. Lighter, newer. 30 years newer instead of 50. Somebody had taken this brick out and put it back in. Maren put her shoulder against the wall and worked the brick with both hands. It came. A puff of dust. A small stone shower. Then the brick slid free into her palm. Behind the brick was a hollow the size of 2 fists, wrapped in oilcloth, tied with twine that had gone the color of straw. She lifted the bundle out. She set it on the floor next to the candle. She sat on her heels. She did not open it yet, because once she opened it, whatever Edith had hidden behind a chimney for 3 years was going to be in her hands, and Maren had a feeling. She had a feeling that things in the hands cannot be put back. She untied the twine. She unwrapped the oilcloth. Inside the oilcloth were two things: a leather journal, brown, cracked at the spine, stuffed thick with loose pages, and a second envelope, not the kind a notary stamps, the kind a woman addresses by hand. To my daughter Marion, if a stranger brings you this, that stranger is in trouble. Help her. Marion held the envelope to her chest. She closed her eyes. Then she opened the journal. The journal was Edith's. The journal began in 1985. Marion read for 2 hours. She read by candlelight in a cabin on a back road in Vermont, while 4 children slept on the floor behind her. She read the way a person reads a thing she knows is going to change her slowly at first, then faster, then so fast her eyes were going ahead of her brain. Edith Hollister had been a midwife, not a doctor, not a nurse with a license. A nurse with a license once, yes, in Boston in the 60s, but then a midwife in the Vermont hills for 30 years after that. The kind of midwife the doctors did not approve of, and the women in the hollows could not live without. Edith had delivered babies in farmhouses, in trailers, in one barn, in the back of one Buick on the side of Route 100 in a snowstorm in 1989. 211 babies. Edith had counted. 211 babies in 30 years. But the journal was not really about the babies. The journal was about the cabin. In 1980, Edith wrote a woman knocked on her door at 3 in the morning. The woman had a black eye. The woman had a 6-year-old daughter behind her. The woman had nowhere to go because her husband was a sheriff's deputy in the next county. And there was nowhere a sheriff's deputy's wife could go in 1980 in rural Vermont where someone would not call him. Edith took her in. Edith took her in for 6 weeks, until a sister in Maine could be found, until a bus could be paid for, until the woman and the small girl could be put on that bus with $200 in cash and a paper bag of sandwiches and a recipe for cherry pie. That was the first one. After that, there were more. Word travels in hill country. Edith wrote in a way you do not understand until you have lived in it. The other midwives knew first, then the social workers, then the women themselves. 47 women. Between 1980 and 2010-47, women came up the road to Edith Hollister's cabin in the dark and stayed until they could keep walking. Some for 2 days, some for 2 months, one for a year, when there had been a baby and the baby had been small and the husband had been the kind of patient that did not get tired. Edith never charged them. Edith never reported them. Edith hid the cabin behind the thorns she planted herself the year after the first woman came. So the cabin would not be easy to find. So no one would drive past and notice a stranger's car. So nobody's husband looking would say to himself, that house there. The thorns were not pain. The thorns were a door that knew who it was for. Marion put the journal down. She wiped her face. She picked it up again. 1986 was when Augustus Caldwell came in. Augustus Caldwell owned the timber company in the next county. Augustus Caldwell wanted Edith's land. Edith's land was 9 acres and a creek and a stand of red pine that, if it ever went to a sawmill, was worth more money than Edith would see in a life. He offered her $4,000 in 1986. She said no. He offered her $7,000. She said no. He raised his offer to $15,000, and he had a county clerk file a paper that said the parcel had been sold to him in 1979 for $1,200 cash, signed by Edith Hollister. Edith Hollister had not signed it. Edith Hollister had been at a birth in Underhill on the day in 1979 the paper claimed. 22 people had seen her there. She fought the paper for 2 years. She lost 2 appeals. She was about to lose the 3rd. Then, in the spring of 1987, a woman who had stayed at the cabin in 1984 sent her a letter. The woman had remarried. The woman's new husband was a tax accountant in Burlington. The woman's new husband, who knew what Edith had done for his wife once and had never forgotten, had been doing some quiet looking. The woman's new husband had found in the public filings of Caldwell Timber and Holdings a pattern of forged deeds, a pattern of fake invoices to companies that did not exist, a pattern of money moving in and out of a family trust that was never reported on any tax return. Edith took the file to the IRS in March of 1987. Augustus Caldwell was indicted in October. In December, Augustus Caldwell's son, Augustus Jr., the one everyone called Gus Caldwell, age 42, husband, father of 1, was found in his garage in Burlington with the engine of his car running and the door closed. He had left a note for his wife. The note said, "I cannot face it." His wife was a woman named Adelaide. His son was a boy named Bennett. Bennett was 17 years old. Edith wrote about the boy in the journal. Edith wrote that she had gone to the funeral, that she had stood in the back of the chapel in Burlington in a black coat, that she had watched a 17-year-old boy in a borrowed suit walk behind a casket and not cry because he was 17, and 17 was the age when boys do not cry in public. Edith wrote that she had gone home that night and prayed for the boy. Edith wrote that she had wondered, even as she prayed, whether prayer was enough for a boy whose father had just chosen to leave him over a bill. Marin read it twice. Then she sat in the dark and put her hand on the page. Bennett Caldwell, 55 years old, in a gray suit on the green this morning, smiling at her with the smile of a man who has not slept all the way through a night since 1987. Oh no. Oh. She closed the journal. She set it down. She wrapped her arms around her knees and rocked back and forth on the kitchen floor very gently, the way a woman rocks who knows that the thing she is holding has weight in 2 directions, and she will have to carry both. She stayed that way until the candle went out. The next morning, she did not tell the children. She made pancakes from the flour she had bought at Briggs. She made them slowly. She made them perfect. She let Wren pour the syrup. She let Bo eat with his hands. She let Silas tell her about a bird he had seen out the window. A bird he was sure was a hawk, but might have been a crow. Except crows are not that big, are they? They can be, she said. This was bigger. Then maybe it was a hawk. I think it was a hawk. Then it was a hawk. She kissed the top of his head. She did not say. Last night, I read a journal that explained to me why a man in a suit came to this town yesterday to buy us out. I do not know if I can fight him. I do not know if I want to fight him. He is the grandson of the man whose lies killed his own father. He has been carrying that for 38 years. And now he wants this house. And I am living in this house. And he does not know yet how much I know. She did not say any of it. Mothers know. She washed the dishes. She got the children dressed. She set the older two to sweeping the porch and the younger two to playing in the front room with the wooden spoon and a tin cup. She put on her coat. She walked out to where the cut canes of the wild roses still lay in a wet pile. She started baking that afternoon. She had 2 hands wrapped in clean strips of sheet. She had a wood stove that smoked the first 3 times she lit it and then settled. She had Edith's blue notebook. She had Ezra Briggs's flour. She had a borrowed loaf pan she had washed twice. She made the cherry pie. She used Edith's recipe to the letter. Cold butter cut into the flour. Ice water by the tablespoon. Cherries from a jar Imogene Patterson had sent her on Wednesday with a small note that said, "You'll need these. Don't argue." The pie came out lopsided. The crust burned in one corner. Marin stood at the counter with the pie in front of her, and she looked at it the way you look at a thing that is supposed to save your life, and you are not sure it will. She made another one, then a third. The third one was good. The third one was very good. The third one had a lattice top that did not collapse, and a bottom crust that did not weep, and a smell when she pulled it out of the oven that filled the cabin so completely that Bo stopped what he was doing in the front room and walked into the kitchen without speaking and put his small hand on her leg. "Mama." "Yes, baby." "Can we have after dinner?" After dinner is far away. I know. She knelt down. She kissed his forehead. She said, "We'll have a slice tonight. The rest we sell on Saturday." He nodded. Bo was 3. Bo understood selling. That night, the cabin smelled like cherries. Saturday morning, Marin walked into Hollow Creek with 3 pies in a wooden crate Silas had carried, and Iris on her hip, and the other 2 children walking alongside her. Imogene Patterson set up Marin's stall herself. A folding table, a cloth Imogene had embroidered with her own initials decades ago, a hand-lettered sign, Edith Hollister's cherry pie. "Imogene." What? You made a sign. I did. You used her name. I did. Are you sure? Honey, this town has been waiting 3 years to taste this pie again. You let me work. She sold out by 10:30. By 11, 3 women were standing at the empty table asking when she would have more. By noon, Pastor Cordelia Whitman, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair, pinned in a knot at the back of her neck and eyes the color of weather, walked across the green and put $50 on Marin's empty table and said, 6 pies for the Sunday social. Next week, I will pay in advance. Pastor, You will. I have eaten Edith's pie at this market for 27 years. I am not about to let it die because you are too polite to take a check. She took Iris from Marin's arms without asking. She held the baby up to her face. She made a sound at her that Iris responded to with a sound back. Hello, you, Cordelia said to the baby. Cordelia. Saturday, 6 pies. Don't be late. That was how it started. The first month went fast. Marin baked 5 days a week. She got better. The cherry pie got famous. The apple cake got famous. The buttermilk donuts on Saturdays sold so fast. Imogene started taking pre-orders by Tuesday. Ezra Briggs put a small handwritten card on his store counter. Hollister's Pies Saturday Market. He did not charge her for the card. He did not charge her for the flour she bought either the second time. She had argued. He had said, "Pay me when the foundation is built." She had not understood what he meant. He had not explained. Francis Bishop walked into the cabin on a Wednesday afternoon in the 4th week. Francis Bishop was 62. Francis Bishop was a widow. Francis Bishop's husband, a math teacher at the regional high school, had died of a heart attack in his recliner in March of the previous year, and Francis Bishop had been alone in a house that was too quiet for 18 months when Pastor Cordelia had said to her gently on a Sunday after service, "Francis, there is a young woman out at Edith's place. She bakes. She has 4 children. She does not know yet that she needs you." Francis came on a Wednesday with a tray of biscuits. She did not knock. She walked up the porch and saw Marin through the open kitchen door, elbow deep in pie crust. And she said, without preamble, "You are doing it wrong." Marin turned. A woman she had never seen with white hair in a bun and a tray of biscuits and a face that was not unkind, but was not asking permission. "Excuse me. You are using too much water. The crust is going to be tough. I can see it from here." I am Francis Bishop. Cordelia sent me. May I come in?" She came in. She set down the biscuits. She washed her hands in Marin's sink without being told, and she rolled up her sleeves and she said, "Watch." Francis showed her how to pinch the butter into the flour with her fingertips so it stayed cold. Francis showed her how to add the water in 3 small pours instead of 1. Francis showed her how to roll the crust from the center out, not back and forth. Francis did not explain her presence. Frances did not say, "I am here to help you." Frances simply took up space at the counter the way a woman takes up space at a counter where she is needed, and within an hour she was needed. By the end of the afternoon, Frances had made 4 pies, swept the floor, fed Iris a bottle, taught Wren how to braid a piece of dough into a pretty edge, and accepted a cup of tea on the porch. She drank the tea. She looked out at the cut roses. She said, "I am going to come on Tuesdays and Thursdays." Frances, I am not asking. I have been alone in a house too long. You have a baby and 3 more children and 4 hands. I have 2 hands and no use for them. We will work this out. Maren did not argue. She did not have it in her to argue with the kindness of a 62-year-old widow who had decided. By the 2nd month, Hollister's Pies had a partner. By the 3rd month, they had 4 employees. A high school girl named Posey who did the dishes after school. A retired lunch lady named Marlene who came in 3 days a week and wrapped pies in waxed paper with a calm that was almost a religion. A man named Ezra's nephew who ran deliveries in his pickup truck for $10 a run. And Frances, always Frances. The cabin was too small for 4 employees. Ezra Briggs solved it. There was an old creamery building on the edge of town, 2 stories brick, abandoned for 15 years. The owner lived in Florida. The owner wanted $300 a month and did not care what you did with the place as long as the rent came on the 1st. Ezra negotiated him down to $250. Maren signed the lease in the 3rd week of the 3rd month. She used the last of Edith's money and the 1st month's profit. She put a down payment on a stand mixer and a commercial oven paid in installments. She named the bakery Hollister's. She painted the name on the window herself. A reporter from the Burlington paper came out to do a small story for the lifestyle section in the 4th month. Local widow turns Hollister cabin into thriving bakery. The piece ran a 1/4 page. It included a recipe. It mentioned Edith Hollister by name. The piece was read by a great many women in the state of Vermont. One of those women was a woman in her late 50s who lived in a duplex on the south end of Burlington and worked as a librarian at a small private school. Her hair had gone gray early. She had her father's eyes. She had not been back to Hollow Creek since her mother's funeral 3 years ago because she could not face the cabin, because the cabin was the place where her mother had taught her how to roll out crust at the age of 6. And she did not yet know how to be in that place without her mother also being in it. Her name was Marion. She read the article. She sat at her kitchen table for an hour with the paper open in front of her. Then she folded the paper, put it in a drawer, and did not call. Not yet. She would call, but not yet. The piece was also read by a man in a glass office on the top floor of a building in downtown Burlington. Bennett Caldwell read the article. Bennett Caldwell read the article twice. Bennett Caldwell put the paper down on his desk very, very gently. Then he picked up the phone. The next 2 months were the best 2 months of Maren Whitfield's adult life. Silas started 4th grade at Hollow Creek Elementary. Rin started first. Bo went to a half-day preschool that Pastor Cordelia ran out of the church basement on Tuesdays and Thursdays for free, because Cordelia had decided she ran a half-day preschool on Tuesdays and Thursdays now, and that was that. Iris stayed with Francis on the bakery's lower floor in a playpen that Ezra had built with his own hands out of pine. Marin ate 3 meals a day. She slept 6 hours a night. She gained 8 pounds. She started laughing again. Small laughs at first. The kind of laugh you let out and then are surprised by the way you are surprised by a bird in a room. Francis made her drink water. Francis made her sit down. Francis made her on one Tuesday evening put her apron in the laundry and her boots by the door, and walk out onto the porch and watch the sun go down by herself for 15 full minutes with no children and no flower and no thinking. Marin did it. She stood on the porch. She watched the sun set behind the pines. She thought, I am 33 years old, and I have not stood and watched a sunset in a year and a half, and I forgot that I liked them. She went inside. She did not tell Francis she had cried a little. Francis knew. Francis did not say. In the 5th month, the regional cafe chain called. 3 locations. Burlington, Stowe, Montpelier. They wanted 50 pies a week, rotating flavors. They were offering a contract. They were offering it for 1 year with an option to renew. They had read the article. They had tasted the cherry pie. They wanted the cherry pie on their menu. The contract signed was $46,000 a year. Marin read the contract 3 times. She showed it to Francis. Francis read it twice. Francis said, "Sign it." Francis. "Sign it. We can do 50 pies a week, with the new oven, with Marlene full-time. Sign the contract." What if? What if what? What if we can't keep up? Then we will hire another person. What if What if you what? What if I fail? Francis looked at her. Francis took the pen out of her hand. Francis put it back. You will not fail. And if you do, you will fail with people who love you in a town that has been waiting 40 years for someone to fail in it gracefully. Sign the contract, Marin. Marin signed. That night, she put Iris to bed in her own crib, in her own room in the cabin, which now had 2 repaired windows and a new roof on the porch and a coat of paint on the front door. She walked back into the kitchen. She poured herself a single small glass of red wine, the first she had drunk since Reed had died. She raised the glass to the window where Edith's message still glowed faint in the dust she had not erased on the upper right pane, because she would never erase it. Edith. She was alone. She could say it out loud. Edith, thank you. She drank. The wine tasted like a thing she was allowed. The week the contract was signed was the last good week. The first thing that happened was small. A health inspector showed up at the bakery on a Monday morning at 9:15. Marin had never met a health inspector. Marin had filed all her paperwork. Marin had passed her opening inspection in the 3rd month. Marin had a folder in the bakery office with every certificate she was supposed to have and an extra one she had filed just in case. The inspector was a man in his 40s with a clipboard and a face that did not look at her. Routine follow-up. Of course, he walked through the kitchen. He walked through the storage room. He looked in the walk-in cooler. He looked behind the oven. He stopped. He pointed at a hairline crack in the tile floor in front of the proofing cabinet. That is a sanitation hazard. I'm sorry. Cracked tile harbors bacteria. You'll need to repair this within 7 days. Of course, I'll have it fixed today. And he pointed at the ventilation hood. This filter is not up to current code. New code went into effect in March. I had it installed in May, the supplier said. The supplier was wrong. Replace it within 7 days. Of course. And he turned. He looked at the back exit. This door does not have a self-closing hinge. It does. There, you see. Inadequate, replace within 7 days. He wrote on his clipboard. He handed her the carbon copy of the citation. He left. Marin stood with the paper in her hand. She went to the office. She called the supplier of the ventilation hood. The supplier said the inspector was wrong. The supplier said they would send her in writing the certification that the hood met code. She called the city. She asked who had assigned the inspection. The clerk said she did not have that information at her desk and would have to call her back. The clerk did not call back. The next day, a different inspector showed up. This one was a woman. This one wrote 3 more citations. By Friday, Hollister's Bakery had 11 citations totaling $3,100 in fines and a notice of temporary closure pending compliance. Marin read the notice. Marin sat at her desk. Marin did not cry. She picked up the phone and she called the cafe chain and she explained. The cafe chain was understanding. The cafe chain was very understanding. The cafe chain understood for 48 hours. Then the cafe chain called her back and said, "We have been contacted by another supplier. We have decided to go with that supplier. We are sorry. We are going to need to terminate the contract." Marin said, "Who?" The voice on the other end paused. "I'm sorry. I can't share that." "Was it Caldwell?" The voice paused longer. "Mrs. Whitfield, I really cannot." "Was it?" The voice said. "I am sorry, Mrs. Whitfield. I wish you the very best." The line went dead. Marin sat at her desk. She did not move for a long time. Then she put her head down on her arms and stayed that way for an hour. The next morning, Beau started coughing. Beau was 3. Beau had asthma. Beau had had it since he was a baby. It had been managed mostly. 2 inhalers, a nebulizer in a closet, a pediatrician at the clinic in Hollow Creek who had taken him on as a patient in the 2nd month and who had looked at his old chart and said gently, You have done very well, Mama. But Bo was 3, and Bo had been listening to his mother on the phone for 2 days, and Bo had been watching her face. And 3-year-olds do not have a name for what they feel, but they feel it. The coughing started Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, his lips were blue. By Tuesday evening, Marin was driving to the regional hospital in St. Albans with Francis Bishop in the passenger seat, and Bo on Francis's lap with a nebulizer running off the car's cigarette lighter, and Silas and Wren and Iris in the back of Imogene Patterson's borrowed Subaru. The pediatric ER was clean. The pediatric ER was bright. The pediatric ER had a kind nurse with a name tag that said Hannah. Hannah took Bo into a room. Hannah hooked him up to a monitor. Hannah gave him a steroid. Hannah came out 40 minutes later and said, "He is going to be fine. We are going to keep him overnight." Marin said, "Thank you." Marin said, "Thank you." Marin said, "Thank you," a third time because she could not figure out how else to use her mouth. She sat down in the plastic chair in the hallway outside Bo's room. Francis took Iris and Wren and Silas down to the cafeteria for soup. Marin sat alone in the hallway. Her hands were shaking. Her phone was at 3%. She had $412 in her checking account and a closed bakery and a canceled contract and a son in a hospital bed and 3 more children who were going to need to eat tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. She put her face in her hands. She had been here before. She had been here at 1 in the morning in the rain on a road in Vermont with $47 in her pocket and 4 wet children. And the only thing that had pulled her out of that night was a window. She did not have a window tonight. She had a hospital hallway. She had a vending machine that hummed. She had a clock on the wall that said 10:42. She thought, read. She thought, read I cannot. She thought, read I am out of road. Her face was in her hands. She did not look up. She heard footsteps in the hallway. She thought it was Francis coming back. She did not look up. The footsteps stopped in front of her. The footsteps did not move. Marin looked up. A woman was standing in front of her. A woman in her late 50s. Gray hair to her shoulders. A wool coat the color of a winter sky. A cloth bag over one arm. Eyes that were her father's eyes. Marin could not have known this, but she would in a moment. The woman was crying. The woman had been crying for some time. The woman said, "Mrs. Whitfield." "Yes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to find you like this. I drove from Burlington. I should have called. I didn't have your number. The bakery was closed. Pastor Cordelia gave me directions. She told me you were here." "I'm sorry. Who?" The woman put her hand to her mouth. The woman lowered her hand. The woman said, "My name is Marion Hollister Lang. Edith was my mother. She wrote me a letter 3 years before she died and told me that one day a woman would come to her cabin who needed me. She told me I would know when. She said I would feel it. Marion's voice broke. I felt it tonight, Mrs. Whitfield. I'm so sorry I did not feel it sooner. She sat down in the plastic chair next to Marin. She did not touch her. She did not have to. She just sat there. Two women in a hospital hallway under a fluorescent light. One of them, the daughter of a midwife who had hidden 47 women in a cabin behind thorns, and the other, the 48th. Marion looked at the closed door of Beau's room. Marion looked at Marin's hands. Marion said, "My mother left the cabin to whoever needed it. She did not leave it to me, but she also left me something else, and it's time I bring it out." She set the cloth bag on the floor between them. The bag was full. She did not open it yet. She said, 47 women, Mrs. Whitfield. My mother kept a list. I have it. I have the names. Some are still alive. I have been carrying this list for 3 years, and I did not know what I was supposed to do with it. She turned her face to Marin. Now I know. Marin could not speak. Marion reached over and took her hand. Marion's hand was warm. Marion's hand was steady. Marion's hand was her mother's hand, with a smaller bone structure and the grip of a woman who had decided. Inside the closed door of Beau's room, the monitor beeped its slow, even rhythm. Outside the hospital window, the night was clear over Vermont. And somewhere in a glass office on the top floor of a building in downtown Burlington, Bennett Caldwell was reading a printout of Hollister's bank balance and smiling the way a man smiles who believes the fight is almost over. He did not know. He could not know. A bag had just been set on the floor of a hospital hallway in St. Albans, and the bag was full of names, and the names were still alive. Beau came home from the hospital on a Thursday morning. He came home in Francis Bishop's coat because his own coat was too thin for the weather. He came home with a new inhaler and a yellow lollipop the night nurse had given him. He came home asleep on Marin's shoulder, his small hand fisted in the collar of her sweater, the way a child fists a thing he is not letting go. Marion drove them. Marion had stayed. Marion had slept in the chair next to Marin in the hospital hallway, and had not said much and had not asked much. Marion had only said once around 3 a.m, "My mother used to say a person in trouble does not need explanations. They need a body next to theirs." And then Marion had not said anything else for the rest of the night. She drove the borrowed Subaru back to Hollow Creek with one hand on the wheel and the cloth bag on the seat between them. The bag of names. When they pulled into the cabin's drive, Pastor Cordelia was on the porch. Pastor Cordelia had a casserole. Pastor Cordelia did not ask if anyone wanted a casserole. Pastor Cordelia had simply made one and brought it and put it in the oven, and now the cabin smelled like a kitchen that someone else had taken charge of for a few hours, and Marin walked through the door and almost cried again from the smell alone. Francis took Beau and put him in his bed. Imogene Patterson was in the living room with Iris. Imogene had been there since before dawn. Imogene did not say anything about it. Wren and Silas had been at Imogene's house for 2 nights. They came running across the porch when they saw the car, and they did not let their mother go for a long time. Marin stood in the front room of the cabin with her 4 children touching her at 4 different points, and Francis on one side, and Imogene on the other, and Cordelia stirring something on the stove, and Marian still holding the cloth bag, and she thought, this is what Edith meant. This, right here, this room. Marian set the bag on the kitchen table. She did not open it yet. She looked at Marin and she said, "When you are ready, not before." Marin nodded. She put the children to bed. She washed her face. She came back to the kitchen. She sat down at the table across from Marian Hollister Lang. She said, "Now." Marian opened the bag. The bag had 3 things in it. The first was a leather-bound book, older than the journal, older than the cabin almost. The pages were rag paper. The handwriting on the inside cover said, "Edith Burnham, in a girl's hand, dated 1952. Edith's maiden name. Edith's first ledger." The second was a stack of envelopes tied with string, 47 of them. The third was a black and white photograph in a small wooden frame. The photograph was of 2 women on a porch. One of them was unmistakably Edith. Younger, maybe 40, hair pulled back, smiling at the camera in a way that suggested whoever was taking the picture had said something funny. The other woman in the photograph was a stranger. She had a baby on her hip. She had a black eye. The frame had a date on the back in pencil. October 14th, 1980. Marian touched the frame with one finger. "This is the first one, the first woman my mother helped. Her name was Eulalie Demarest. She is 78 years old, and she lives in a senior living complex in Saco, Maine. I called her this morning. She is coming on Saturday." "Marian." I called all of them Marin. The ones who are still alive. 29 of them are still alive. 22 are coming. 22. They are coming on Saturday. Marin put her hand over her mouth. "I cannot." "Marin?" "Marian, I cannot afford to feed 22 people. I cannot. The bakery is closed. The contract is." "Marin?" "They are not coming for food, and they are not coming for you. They are coming because my mother saved their lives, and they have wanted for years, for 30 years, some of them to give something back. And now there is a place to give it back to." Marin did not speak. Marian opened the leather book. The first page in Edith's young hand said, "Names of women I have helped, so I do not forget. So someone someday knows. 47 names, 47 dates, 47 small annotations next to each. Reunited with Sister Maine. Bus to Boston. New husband, kind, 1985. Son, Marcus, born here. March, 1991. Healthy mother, and child to Burlington with the Pinckneys. Marin read the list with her finger. She read it twice. She read it a third time. When she looked up, Marian was crying again. "My mother," Marian said, "did this her whole life, and we did not know. Her own children. We did not know. We thought she was just a midwife." "Marian, we thought she was just a midwife, Marin." Marin reached across the table and took her hand. She held it. She did not say, "Your mother saved my life with a window. Your mother is the reason my children are alive. Your mother was a great woman, and you are her daughter, and that means something." She did not say it. She just held the hand. The two women sat in the kitchen of a cabin in Vermont, and they cried for a woman they had both loved in different ways, neither of them quite the way Edith had deserved to be loved, but as much as either of them had known how at the time. That was Thursday. By Friday morning, Pastor Cordelia had opened the doors of Hollow Creek Methodist. By Friday afternoon, Imogene Patterson had organized lodging for 16 overnight guests across 7 local households. By Friday evening, Frances Bishop and Marlene, the retired lunch lady, had baked enough bread in Frances's home oven and in the church kitchen to feed 30 people for 2 days. Ezra Briggs paid for the groceries. Ezra Briggs did not announce that he had paid for the groceries. Ezra Briggs sent his nephew over with a truck full of bags and a note that said Edith would have done it for me. By Saturday morning at 9, the parking lot of Hollow Creek Methodist held 27 cars. 22 women had come. 5 of them had brought adult daughters. The youngest woman in the room was 41. The oldest was 86. They had come from Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, upstate New York, Connecticut, and the far end of Vermont. They had come in cars and on a bus, and one woman had been driven down by her grown grandson, who sat in the back of the church hall with his hat in his hands and did not speak because he understood that he was not the point. Eulalie Demarest, 78, was the first to arrive. Eulalie Demarest walked into the church hall with a cane and a green coat and the same eyes as the photograph from 1980. Only with 45 years of weather written across them. And she walked straight up to Marin Whitfield, and she put her hand on Marin's cheek, and she said, "Honey." "Yes, ma'am." "You are the next one." "Yes, ma'am." "You are going to do beautifully." Marin could not speak. Eulalie Demarest patted her cheek twice and went and sat down at a folding table and asked for coffee. The other women came in slowly through the morning. They embraced each other. They did not have to be introduced. Most of them had never met before, but each of them had been in the cabin behind the thorns at some point in the last 45 years for a few days or a few weeks or one whole winter, and that meant they were sisters of a kind that did not need a roll call. Some of them cried. Most of them just held each other. Marian moved among them with a coffee pot. Cordelia sat in a corner with a notebook and listened. Frances took down everyone's name and address and checked them against Edith's list. Marin stood in the doorway and watched. She watched until she could not anymore. She walked outside into the parking lot, and she stood by Marion's car, and she put her hands on the cold metal of the trunk, and she let her shoulders shake for a minute, exactly 1 minute, because that was all she was going to let herself have. Then she went back inside. Pastor Cordelia stood up at the front of the hall at 11. Pastor Cordelia did not give a sermon. Pastor Cordelia said, "Edith Hollister was a midwife in this county for 30 years. Edith Hollister also kept a cabin behind a wall of thorns at the end of an old road, and she opened that cabin to 47 women who had nowhere else to go. Edith Hollister did this without telling her own children. She did this without telling her pastor. She did this without telling anyone in this town who was not also one of the women she helped. She did this for 45 years, and she died 3 years ago, and the chain might have ended. The chain did not end, because 3 months ago on a rainy night, a woman named Marin Whitfield, with 4 children and $47, walked up the road and broke down a door, and Edith had been waiting for her." Cordelia paused. Cordelia looked across the room. Cordelia said, "Tomorrow is the court date. A man named Bennett Caldwell, whose grandfather tried to take the cabin from Edith in 1986, is now trying to take the cabin from Marin. We are not going to let him." Cordelia paused again. Cordelia said, "But before we talk about what we are going to do tomorrow, I want each of you, if you are willing, to write down on a piece of paper what Edith did for you. The date, the circumstance, what it has meant to your life since. We are going to bring those papers to court. We are going to put them in front of a judge. We are going to make sure that whatever piece of paper Bennett Caldwell has ours weighs more." 22 women picked up pens. 22 women began to write. Marin stood at the back of the hall and watched 22 women bend their heads over 22 pieces of paper and write with their own hands the testimony of a woman who had carried them and could not testify for herself anymore. Marion came up next to her. Marion put a hand on her arm. Marion said very quietly, She knew this would happen. I don't know how, but she knew." Marin did not answer. She did not have to. She watched. That night, Marin went home to the cabin. The children were already there. Frances had fed them. Imogene had read them 3 books. Pastor Cordelia had tucked them in. Marin sat on the porch in Edith's wool scarf, the one with the lavender that was almost gone, and she watched the dark over the trees. A car turned into the drive. She had not been expecting a car. The car was not Bennett's. The car was not Marion's. The car was a small gray sedan, and it stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, and the headlights cut off, and the driver's door opened slowly, and an old woman climbed out. Slowly, with a cane. She climbed the porch steps one at a time. She stopped halfway. She breathed. She climbed the rest. She stood at the top of the steps. She was 79. Marin did not yet know she was 79. Marin only knew that she was old, and that she was thin, and that she was wearing a coat too big for her shoulders, and that she had come alone at night to a stranger's house. The old woman said, "Mrs. Whitfield." "Yes. My name is Adelaide Caldwell." Marin did not move. She did not stand up. She did not invite the woman in. She simply waited. Adelaide Caldwell put both hands on top of the cane. Adelaide Caldwell said, "My son does not know I am here. All right. My son has been carrying a story for 38 years that is not true. I gave him that story. I gave it to him because I was afraid of him hating his father. I gave it to him because I could not face what his father had done. I gave it to him when he was 17, and I gave it to him every year after that until it set. And I have known for 30 years that I did the wrong thing, and I did not have the courage to undo it." She paused. She breathed. "I am old, Mrs. Whitfield. I do not have many more chances. I came tonight because I read the newspaper article. I came tonight because tomorrow my son is going to stand in a courtroom and lie about a woman who was a friend to me once, and I cannot let him. Edith Hollister was kind to me, Mrs. Whitfield. I went to her once, in 1983, for something I will not say to you, but which she did not judge me for, and which she did not tell my husband about, and which is one of 2 reasons I am still alive. I owe her this. I should have done it 40 years ago." She set a folder down on the railing. "These are letters from my husband, letters he wrote me in the year before his death. Letters that show in his own hand that he knew what his father had done, that he had been part of it, that he was not driven to kill himself by Edith Hollister's accusation. He was driven by his own guilt, by what he had become, by what he could not undo." She closed her eyes. "Take them. Show them to my son. Show them to the judge. I am too tired to do it myself, but I will sign whatever you put in front of me." She opened her eyes. "My boy was 17. He has been 17 ever since. I want him to grow up before I die." Marin stood up. She crossed the porch. She did not pick up the folder yet. She put her arms around Adelaide Caldwell. The old woman went stiff for 1 second. Then the old woman put her face into Marin's shoulder and made a sound that was not quite crying, that was older than crying. That was the sound of a thing that had been held in for a generation, finally laying itself down. They stood that way for a long time. The porch was cold. The pines were still. The cabin behind them held its breath. When Adelaide pulled back, Marin said, "Will you come tomorrow? Will you let me?" "Yes." "Then yes." She drove away in the small gray sedan. Marin stood on the porch with the folder in her hands. She did not open it. She would open it inside with Marion. She turned to go in. She stopped at the door. She looked up at the window. The light from the kitchen made the words in the dust glow faintly. "If you are here, God brought you. Don't give up. Edith." Marin put her hand on the glass. She said in a voice the night could not quite catch, "Edith, there are two of them now, Bennett and Adelaide. Help me carry both." The kitchen light blinked once, the way kitchen lights do when an old wire is settling. Marin went inside. The courthouse in St. Albans was a square brick building with a green dome. It had been built in 1899. The hearing room on the second floor had a tin ceiling and 10 rows of wooden benches and a single tall window that faced east and let in a band of white morning light across the judge's empty desk. Bennett Caldwell arrived at 8:45. His attorney was a woman in her 30s in a navy suit. She carried a leather portfolio. She did not look at the gallery as she walked in. Bennett did. Bennett looked at the gallery and he stopped. The gallery was full. 22 women in the front 3 rows. Eulalie Demarest in the aisle seat with her cane across her knees. Pastor Cordelia next to her. Marion Hollister Lang in the second row with the leather book on her lap. Francis Bishop, Imogen Patterson, Ezra Briggs, his nephew Marlene, the retired lunch lady, 3 women from the Burlington bus, 2 women from the main carpool, and a row of older women in the back whose names Bennett did not know, but whose eyes followed him all the way to his table. Bennett looked away. His attorney touched his arm. He sat. The judge was a man named Holloway, 63. He had been a judge in Vermont for 19 years. He looked at the courtroom with the mild surprise of a judge who had been told this was a routine property dispute. Bennett's attorney spoke first. She presented the deed her client had filed in 1979. She presented the chain of title. She presented her client's standing as the sole living heir of Augustus Caldwell, original purchaser. She presented the gaps in Marin Whitfield's documentation. She spoke for 26 minutes. She was good. She was very good. When she sat down, the room was quiet. Marin stood up. Marin had no attorney. Marin had Marion, who was not an attorney, but who had taught school for 35 years and had a teacher's voice and a teacher's calm. Marion had organized the file. Marion had tabbed the documents. Marion had told her that morning in the cabin, "You will do this, not me. The judge needs to see your face. He needs to see you tell it." Marin walked to the lectern. She had Edith's letter. She had the notarized title. She had the deed. She had 3 pages of bank records showing she had paid her taxes since the 3rd month. She had the original deed from 1962 that Edith had inherited from her own mother, which Marion had brought from a safe deposit box in Burlington that morning. Marin put the documents in front of Judge Holloway one at a time. Marin explained each one. Marin did not raise her voice. When she was done with the documents, she said, "Your Honor, I have one more thing. Yes, I have 22 letters from women Edith Hollister helped between 1980 and 2010. Each letter is signed and dated. Each woman is in this room. I would ask the court to admit them as evidence of Mrs. Hollister's character and intent." Bennett's attorney stood up. "Your Honor, this is not relevant to the question of title." The judge looked at her. The judge looked at Marin. The judge looked at the gallery. The judge said, "I will allow it." Marin handed the letters across. Judge Holloway read the first one. Judge Holloway read the second one. By the fifth one, his face had changed. By the 10th, he had set them down and was looking out the window. He read all 22. It took 11 minutes. The courtroom did not make a sound. When he was done, he looked up. He looked at Bennett Caldwell. He looked at Bennett Caldwell for a long time. Then he looked at Marin Whitfield and he said, "Mrs. Whitfield, the court finds in your favor. The deed filed by Mr. Caldwell's grandfather in 1979 is fraudulent. The transfer of title from Mrs. Edith Hollister to you is valid. The cabin and the surrounding 9 acres are yours." He paused. He said, "I am also referring this matter to the State Attorney General's office for review of the original 1979 filing. Mr. Caldwell, you are not under investigation. Your grandfather's estate is." He banged the gavel. It was over. The room exhaled. Bennett Caldwell did not move. Bennett Caldwell sat at the defense table with his hands flat on the wood, looking at the wood, not blinking. His attorney touched his arm. He did not respond. Then Adelaide Caldwell stood up. She had been sitting in the back of the gallery in a black coat with her cane across her lap. Bennett had not seen her when he came in. Bennett had not looked. She stood up now. The whole courtroom turned. She walked slowly with the cane to the front of the gallery. She stood at the rail. She looked at her son. She said, "Bennett." He looked up. His face did not understand at first. Then it did. He said, "Bennett, I am sorry. Mama." "I am so sorry, Bennett. Your father did not die because of Edith Hollister. Your father died because of what your father had done. I let you believe a story for 38 years. I was a coward. I should have told you when you were 18, and I did not. I should have told you when you were 30, and I did not. I am telling you now in front of these women, because these women deserve to hear it, and because you deserve to hear it, and because I do not have many more chances." Bennett's face, his face, it went still. It went the kind of still that is not stillness. It was the stillness of a man whose interior was rearranging itself in real time and who had no facial expression that knew yet what it should look like. He stood up. He looked at his mother. He said, "Mama." She said, "Come home with me." He did not answer. He turned. He looked across the courtroom at Marin Whitfield. He looked at her for what felt like a long time. He did not say anything. His mouth opened. It closed. It opened again. Marin walked out from behind the lectern. She walked across the well of the courtroom with the bailiff watching but not stopping her because the bailiff was 61 and had also read the letters from over the judge's shoulder and was not going to stop her. Marin walked up to Bennett Caldwell. She stood in front of him. She did not say much. She said, "This land took care of your mother once. You did not know that. It is going to take care of women for a long time after I am gone. There is a place for you in that if you want it. There is also no place for you in it if you don't. Either is okay." He did not speak. She said, "Go home with your mother, Bennett." His eyes filled. For the first time in 38 years, his eyes filled. He nodded once. He walked slowly to where Adelaide stood. He took her arm. They walked out of the courtroom together. Outside the courthouse, the morning had gone bright. The sun was over the green dome, and the leaves on the maples were the color of fire. The 22 women came out of the courthouse together. They came out slowly in twos and threes, holding each other's elbows, and they walked down the wide stone steps into the street. They were each carrying one sunflower. Cordelia had thought of it. Cordelia had bought the sunflowers that morning. Cordelia had passed them out in the parking lot. Cordelia had not said why. The 22 women lined up on the courthouse lawn. They formed 2 long curving rows along the sidewalk like an honor guard. Marin came down the steps. The women raised the sunflowers. 22 yellow blooms lifted in 22 old hands against the blue sky over St. Albans, Vermont. Marin walked between them. She did not run. She did not cry, even not yet. She walked slowly, because some moments you walk slowly through, because to run is to forget. Eulalie Demarest, at the head of the line, took her hand as she passed. Eulalie said, "We will see you on Saturday, honey." Saturday. For pies. Marin laughed. It came out half a sob. She said. She walked to Marion's car. Marion was already crying. They drove home. Hollister House Foundation opened in the spring. It opened in the old creamery on the edge of town. The bakery still operated downstairs. The upstairs had been converted with the help of Ezra's nephew and 3 high school students working off community service hours into 4 small apartments. Each apartment had 1 bedroom. Each apartment had a kitchen and a bathroom. Each apartment was furnished with donations from Hollow Creek and Burlington, and from a women's circle in Brattleboro that had read about the cabin in a small newspaper article and decided. Frances Bishop became the executive director. She was 62, going on 63. She had not, she said, ever held a job with a title before. She wore the title the way she wore her wedding ring after the funeral, with surprise and with steady purpose and without taking it off. Pastor Cordelia became the chaplain. Imogene Patterson became the volunteer coordinator. Ezra Briggs became the treasurer because no one else could be trusted with the books, and because his wife had said to him at the kitchen table one night, "You will be the treasurer, Ezra." And Ezra knew his wife. Marion Hollister Lang became the chairwoman of the board. Marin became the founder. Marin did not run the day-to-day. Marin ran the bakery. Marin raised her 4 children. Marin came to the foundation 3 times a week for board meetings, for new resident intake interviews, for the small daily things that keep a place alive. Bennett Caldwell did not come to the opening. He sent a check. The check was for $112,000, which was, the note explained, the value of the original 1979 transaction adjusted for inflation. The check was made out to Hollister House Foundation. The note was signed in his hand and notarized. Adelaide came. Adelaide was at the opening with a cane and a wool coat and a small bouquet from her own garden, which she put in a vase on the receptionist's desk and which sat there for a week. 3 months after the opening, on a Tuesday afternoon in the 2nd week of June, Marin Whitfield was in the kitchen of the cabin teaching Wren how to fold the corner of a pie crust when there was a knock on the door. Marin went to answer. A woman stood on the porch. The woman had a thin coat and 3 children behind her, 2 girls and a boy, the oldest about 9 and the youngest about 4. The woman had not slept in some time. The woman had a duffel bag in one hand. The woman had a bruise that was older than yesterday under her left eye. The woman said, "Mrs. Whitfield, my name is Delia Mercer. Pastor Cordelia gave me your address. She said you would know what to do." Marin stood in the doorway. Marin looked at the woman. Marin looked at the children. Marin looked at the duffel bag. She said, "Come in, honey." She fed them. She fed them sandwiches and apples and milk. She did not ask questions. She let the 4 children run in the yard with Silas and Wren and Bo. She let Iris, who could now walk, toddle after them on her unsteady feet. Delia sat at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a coffee cup and shook for an hour. Marin sat across from her and did not speak. When Delia could speak, Marin listened. When Delia stopped speaking, Marin said, "Come outside with me." She took Delia out the back door. She walked her across the yard. She stopped at the back of the cabin where 8 months ago she had buried a tin box in the soft ground between the well and the woodshed. The box held $3,000 in 20s. The box held a copy in Marin's own hand of every recipe in Edith's blue notebook. The box held a key to a 1-bedroom apartment above the bakery on Main Street. The box held a letter. Marin handed Delia the shovel. "Dig," she said. "What?" "Dig. Right here. Under this stone, Mrs. Whitfield. Marin. Marin, I don't understand. You don't have to. Just dig. Delia dug. She found the box. She lifted it out. She set it on the grass. She looked at Marin. Marin said, "When you are ready, you will leave a box like this for the next woman. That is the only rule. That is the only rule there has ever been." Delia opened the box. She read the letter. She put her face in her hands. Marin sat down in this grass next to her and put an arm around her shoulders, and the two women sat that way for a long time. And the late afternoon June sun came down through the pines onto the back of Edith Hollister's cabin. And somewhere in the front yard, Iris was laughing, and somewhere in the kitchen, Wren was finishing a pie, and somewhere down the road in a creamery building on the edge of town, Francis Bishop was making coffee for a board meeting, and somewhere far away in a small house in Burlington, an old woman was sitting in a chair by a window and reading her son's first letter to her in 8 months. The letter said, "Mama, I am working on growing up. I am not very good at it yet, but I am trying. Bennett." Adelaide read the letter 3 times. Adelaide closed her eyes. Adelaide whispered in a voice no one else heard, "Edith, I owed you. I think I have paid." She put the letter on her lap. She slept in the chair by the window with the letter in her lap, and the kitchen light, the way kitchen lights do, blinked once and settled. A year later, on the anniversary of the night Marin Whitfield had walked up the road in the rain, 3 women stood on the porch of the cabin in Hollow Creek. Marin Whitfield, Marion Hollister Lang, Delia Mercer. 3 women, 3 generations of one chain. Marin held a damp cloth. She walked to the front window, the big one, the one that looked out over a yard where wild roses no longer grew, where instead there was a riot of sunflowers 6 feet tall, and daisies up to a child's knee, and a path mowed through the middle of it down to the road. She wiped the inside of the window. She wiped very carefully the words that had been there for almost 4 years now. "If you are here, God brought you. Don't give up." Beneath the floor near the stove, there is something for you to begin again. Edith. She wiped them off. She did it slowly. She did it with reverence. She did it the way a person closes a book they have read many times. Then she dipped her finger in the damp on the cloth, and she wrote in the dust she had not yet cleaned from the lower half of the pane. "If you are here, you are not alone. You never were." Beneath the floor near the stove, there is something to begin again. You are part of a chain. Hold on. Whitfield, Hollister, Mercer. Below the names, 4 small handprints in the dust, where Silas Rinbow and Iris had each that morning pressed their palm to the glass. Marion put her hand on Marin's shoulder. Delia put her hand on Marion's. Outside, the sunflowers turned slowly toward the late afternoon sun. Inside in the cabin, Edith Hollister had hidden behind thorns to protect the women she could not name. Three women stood at a clean window and watched the light come in. The chain held. The chain would hold. Somewhere down the road, on a back road in Vermont, that the county map would not promise you, there was always going to be another woman walking. And there would always be a window waiting for her to wipe the dust away.